All right, so yes, I am David Kelleher. I teach at Emerson College, currently teaching web design and development courses. So hello to my students who are here today. Yep. And hello and welcome to everyone else. I'm going to be covering three chapters today. One on debugging, and the other one is on database design, which this is technically the beginner track. But database normalization is actually a pretty advanced topic. So I'd be able to give yourself a pat on the back after I'm finished today. I'm going to start with debugging code and mostly talk about designing databases and talk a little bit about MySQL. There's all sorts of stats on how much time is spent on fixing your code or testing the code. Most numbers say at least 50% of your time is done on testing and fixing problems. Display errors is something that you want to turn on in your development environment so that when there's a problem or a crash, it'll tell you what's wrong right in the browser window. So it's really important that display errors is never used in production or live sites. You do not want these error messages showing up, information that hackers could potentially exploit. So display errors and turning on error reporting is great for your sandbox. It's great for your development environment, but never make sure it's turned on in production site. One problem with display errors is it will only show you the errors that happen during runtime. Right? So if there's a syntax error, then nothing in the page actually executes. And if nothing in the page actually executes, that means display errors itself isn't executing. So you wouldn't actually see anything, you would just get a blank screen. So here's a trick that I've used in rare cases where I couldn't write to a log because I didn't have access to do write permissions, or where there's a site where I couldn't change the PHP configuration, but I had to see the errors up on the browser screen. I used an include file. So you have one file which turns on error reporting and sets display errors, and then that includes another file that actually has the problems in the crash. That way, the page will actually execute that turns on error reporting, and then your file that crashes will actually display the errors. The most common errors, spelling errors. Use consistent capitalization with your variables. PHP class names are usually capitalized. Variables and object names have that camel case where you start lowercase and all the other words in the string are uppercase. Constants are usually written all uppercase. And MySQL table and fields are lowercase with underscores. And that's for Windows compatibility. If you want to have a MySQL database, be able to use it in both a Windows environment and a Linux environment and be able to port them back and forth. You want to use all lowercase letters when you're naming your MySQL tables and fields. Something like this is really hard to read. It takes a while to figure out what is actually being done with that line of code, let alone whether the syntax is correct and you have all your punctuation correct. So write your code. Try and make it easy, clean, and readable, easy to follow. If you have to write multiple lines of code to simplify it, that would be a good idea. When you try and write lines of code like this, it's very difficult to keep track of all your punctuation and make sure you get it all correct. Unbalanced quotations. That is, if you're missing a single quote or a double quote, you can usually catch these in your code editor. If you're using a code editor that has syntax highlighting, you'll be able to spot those errors very quickly. You can see in this code editor, all these strings are highlighted in orange. Okay. And where I'm missing a quote, suddenly the colors got reversed. So if you have your syntax highlighting turned on while you're typing, you'll be able to catch those mistakes pretty quickly. Unbalanced curly braces are another common one, and they can be difficult to track down. In PHP, you usually get an unexpected end error or an unexpected curly brace. So this usually happens when you have an extra curly brace, or you're missing one, or you have one in the wrong place. And the easiest way to track down this type of error is to make sure you're doing standard indenting on all of your code. So anytime you open a function or a code block, like a control structure like an if statement or a while loop, you want to indent everything inside that by one extra tab. And then when you close your curly brace, move everything back one tab. If you're missing a curly brace, PHP will report that the error is at the very end of your document because it doesn't know where it should be. That can be one of the trickier problems to track down. This is the most evil error, the headers already sent. First time most people encounter that, you have absolutely no idea what could be possibly going wrong. This line of code here, this would throw an error. And the error you would get was cannot modify header information because the headers are already sent. So you look at the code and you see you're only sending the headers once. And so you wonder, well, where are they being sent before? This is at the top of my code. I'm not sending it anywhere else. And so the problem is here, if there's any HTML before the headers, then the server will be nice, right, and think that you're sending an HTML document and will automatically create HTTP headers for you. So this space here is already creating the HTTP headers. So because the headers are being sent there automatically, this next line becomes the duplicate header. So look for blank lines or white space before your header. Okay. Logic errors are where there are no syntax errors or crashes in your code, but it's doing the wrong thing. A lot of times I will solve these with pencil and paper. I will write down how the variables are changing over time on a piece of paper to help track down these errors. You can do it with a debugger.